very briefly. Okay, who's ever bitten into horrible food? Food that you don't like? What's the reaction when you don't bite into that horrible food? What's the sort of reaction? What happens when you...
Revulsion.
Yeah, okay. So the insula, it triggers all sorts of reflexes. Okay? When you bite into horrible food, activates the insular cortex, part of the brain. Okay? In mammals, it's the same as humans. Same. Okay? The only difference is in humans, we're going to touch on it also, is that it also gets activated when you hear bad news, when you hear things that you believe are morally wrong, and we're going to touch on that, okay, because it's important. The insula reads your viscera, and it takes the information from the viscera and keeps it in the memory. Okay, anyone ever got food poisoning before? Okay, would you eat that food again? Probably not. Can you really recall the situation? Okay, well you may or you may not, but equally, why do you think if you've got food poisoning, it locks itself into the memory? Why would it be?
Survival.
Precisely, to keep you alive. I won't eat those again. I won't eat that again. Okay, if that makes sense. So it stays in your memory, and when you see the food again, you won't eat it again. Okay, you won't put yourself in danger. The brain is a sophisticated mechanism. Okay, you won't eat it again. And in mammals it's the same. Okay, there's some work by Professor Robert Sapolsky. If you get a chance to read his book, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst, it's a really, really good read, by the way. And he talks about how the insular cortex evolved to teach us to feel disgusted by things that would cause harm to us. The evolution of the insular cortex from tasting bad food to triggering the visceral reaction when you taste bad food to hearing news or being exposed to news. So our societies, as Robert Sapolsky puts it, develop a concept of moral transgression. Rather than evolve a new brain region that would do that, it was funneled through the insular cortex. There's like a mesh between the same sort of disgust you have when you eat food you don't like, or food that gives you food poisoning, and also the news you get, like bad news, or news that you think is morally wrong. Have you ever had a situation where you've seen something in the news that you think is morally wrong, and you feel disgusted, feel nauseous, or someone tells you that happened to them? You hear about, someone being mugged, a little old lady gets mugged, little man, anybody gets mugged for that matter, but I'm just saying, the point being, you hear a story about, say, an elderly person getting mugged, and it causes disgust, nausea, okay? So that sort of moral transgression, where that part of the brain, okay? So you hear a story that's morally wrong, and it sparks that off. You feel disgusted by that person in the same way you would as you ate bad food. Okay, so I want to elaborate that the work of Robert Sapolsky says that in moral transgression, we didn't evolve a new part of the brain for that. There's that mesh. And we'll hold that thought because we're going to come back to it in the second half of the seminar because it's important. The link between feeling disgusted and what's right and wrong, or what you believe is right and wrong, and who is right and who is wrong, for want of a better word. So, the old saying, vive la difference. What's normal for one person might not be normal for someone. And you can see why sometimes structures of society, if we take this hypothesis on board, we can see friction. So if you see someone else eating food that you don't eat, doing things that you don't self-awareness is really important. Okay? And what I mean by that, be aware of what's causing a spark. Be aware of what's causing a reaction, because if you flip the other side of the coin, people might see you in the same way. Okay? Your rules are yours, mine are mine. But more to the point, it then becomes easy to build a mechanism against people or situations that we can magnify. Things can get magnified more than what they are. Has anyone ever magnified things made them more than what they are? Okay, and I think everybody does it to a point, but we'll sort of touch on it as we go along. So just briefly on the insula, I just want to sort of clear a few things up, by the way. The insula is also responsible for self-awareness, emotional, physical, integrates all the feelings through our body, and also it's responsible for interoception, which is a word we're going to come back to as we go along. Interoception is another sense, sensory perception. Okay, so we're going to touch on that as we go along. Studies have shown when you're having feelings of emotion or feelings of variety, the insula is not the only thing that's responsible. It doesn't mean that the insula is the only thing that's doing what it does. It doesn't mean that's the only thing that is active. There are other structures important too. We won't cover the other structures today, but we'll focus on this structure. Okay, we're going to focus on this structure as we go along throughout today. The insula cortex, the way I would put it, is like a bridge between the instinctive reaction, the amygdala, and the reason, the prefrontal cortex. It's almost like a mediator between emotions and feelings, okay, which we'll touch on as we go along. So the moral of the story is be careful what you eat. And if you're going to take someone on a date, don't take them to eat bad food because they're going to link it to you. So if you take nothing away from today, on your next date's anniversary or the next time you take somebody out, take them to a nice place to eat nice food. Because if you take them for bad food, they're going to have the same visceral reaction. And you don't want that visceral reaction that they have with the food to link to you, if that makes sense. So if you take nothing else away, when you go home, what did you learn today? I learned that the next time I take someone out for a meal, I'm going to take them for something to eat nice, because if I take them something bad, they're going to link it to back. Okay. So we're going to do an exercise now. Okay. What I'd like you to do, if you just take your heart rate. Everyone know to take their heart rate? If you can take your pulse here. I've got one of these funny things that take your heart rate these days. It also tells me how much sleep I've got too. If you haven't got one of those, it's fine. To take your heart rate, if you just, you can find your pulse rate here. We can find your pulse rate there. Okay. Has everyone got their heart rate? Okay, cool. What I'll do is, now you've got your heart rate there. I'm going to, you ever got a stopwatch, Paul? Yeah. So if you can time the heart rate for a minute, so if you give them the cue, Paul, tell them when to go. Yeah. So Paul's going to give you the cue.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so you just record your heart rate for now, please, whatever it is. Now the next step I want you to do is some activity you can manage. Okay, nothing that's going to push you too hard, whatever you can manage. Okay, so any activity that you want to do, you can do tens. You can do. I wouldn't recommend burpees, by the way. But you can sort of, get up and walk around the room, do some press-ups. Paul will take you through a session if you want to. Anything you want to do, just if you do some activity, even if you walk up and down the room, yeah. Just a bit of light activity. Nothing too much, by the way. Nothing too much.
This one might do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the heart will go all through there. Okay, so yeah. Okay, the next step is now you've done the activity. Is if we're going to retake the heart rate. So what we can do, if you take your heart rate for, we'll do it for a full minute again anyways, it's fine. The other way of doing it is 15 seconds times 4, but we'll do it for a full minute and we'll go from there. If you do go to the toilet, by the way, just watch the tripwire. Health and safety. Okay, so yeah, we're just going to take the heart rate again. Yeah. Okay, so Paul's going to give you the cue again. We've got some people going for a run around the block as well. It's an opportunity to...
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Last 1 minute, guys.
Okay, if you take your heart rate. So what happened to your heart rate? Anybody? What happened? It went up, okay. Everybody's heart rate go up? In all the time I've been doing this exercise, I've always got one person in every group whose heart rate doesn't go up. If it's not going up, it's very unlikely if you've done exercise or any activity. When you do activity, blood flows to the muscle group that you're doing the activity, and the heart's got to pump blood. Have I explained that? Personal trainers. Have I explained that properly? So the point being is that heart rate goes up. It does automatically. Like if you walk up a hill, if you go run around the block, okay, it goes up automatically. Also, before we sort of go forward, we're going to hold that forward. What else makes your heart rate go up? Anything else?
Anxiety.
Yeah, good point. Anyone ever had road rage before? You're on the road? Okay. I had a bit of road rage this morning. This guy was driving like this close behind my bumper. Seriously, any closer as you do. But the point being is road rage, when you're angry, when you're scared, danger, after you've eaten, the heart rate goes up. When you're excited, when you see someone you're attracted to, the heart rate. So all these things, your heart rate goes up. Are you aware when your heart rate is going up? Are you aware of it? Okay. Are you aware of your emotions? Can you explain how you feel? Okay. When you feel angry, are you aware of what is making you angry? Okay. When you're sad, are you aware what's making you sad? When you're frustrated, are you aware of what's making you frustrated? Can you sort of see clearly through the mesh? Okay? So, we know that some people struggle to explain how they feel. Okay? If we think about the mesh of emotions. So, what does a baby do when the baby's hungry? Yeah, and the baby knows to cry. Okay? When you say you put your feet in or legs in a swimming pool, are you aware whether it's cold or warm? Or you got the awareness? Okay? And then you kind of desensitize to the feeling. Okay? You know when it's too hot. You know when it's too cold. Okay? You know when you're tired. Okay? Are you aware of that? When you feel tired, when you're drifting off, okay? Are you aware when someone's showing you empathy and vice versa? Someone's being empathic with you. Okay? How do you know when you're thirsty? What happens? Are you aware? And what if you weren't aware? What would happen if you weren't aware you were thirsty? What do you think might happen? You would dehydrate. And if you dehydrated, what would the consequences be? Well, that could be anything within the spectrum. But one of them could be impaired performance. So think of the child now, for a moment, who's got poor interoception skills. So they might be so absorbed in the story that they might wet themselves with not realizing they've done that. So the parents in the group will remember teaching the children how to go to the toilets. You'll see, anyone remember seeing your child wiggle around and do you need to go to the toilet? Because you can sort of see that, but they may not be aware of that. Okay, equally, sort of another story for another day, behavior could be seen as problematic in certain situations with certain individuals who have got difficulty in interoception. Okay, so they struggle to explain how they feel. They struggle to, some young people have been noted to not be aware when they are thirsty, for example. So it might be noticed to leave water out there for them and regulate and say drink every now and again. That's another story for another day, and I'm going to touch on some of that stuff after the break. But I think what's quite interesting, look at the research around this area. How do you know that your body is your body, not somebody else's body? I don't know if you've ever come across the rubber hand experiment where, cut a long story short, they would prick a rubber hand and someone's hand until eventually they'd place the hand under the table and prick the rubber hand, and the people would feel the sensation. Okay? So if you ever get a chance to read a book, it's a good read by Kelly Muller. It's the 8th Century System, and she explains it better than I can explain it, interoception, and she talks about the 8 senses. So the 8 senses being touch, auditory, visual, taste, smell, proprioception. So proprioception, how do I know how far away I am from that? How do I know how to pick the cup up here? Vestibular, how do I balance myself? The inner ear, the functionality. Interoception, my sense of self-awareness emotionally and physically. We talked about the insula. For those of you who came late, there's a stream that talks about the insula, and those of you who want to recap, you can watch the stream, and we go, and you can. It makes a lot of sense because one of the things that the insula does is interoception. Okay, that part of the brain. So you bite into food, the food tastes horrible, or you get food poisoning, you may not eat it again as a protective mechanism. But equally, I mentioned earlier about the work of some scientists saying that morally we have the same visceral response as we do is biting in food. So if you hear a story that you think is morally wrong, the same thing sparks off. The same reflex sparks off. We touched on earlier. We talked about that earlier here, that the brain, we go back to this part here, we'll link it to this part here, that the work of Robert Sapolsky talks about how we've developed a moral transgression rather than develop a new brain region. So it's in that part of the brain. So the insula does one thing and another thing. So the same way you would react to bad food, with that disgust, you react to what you consider being morally wrong. And that causes loads of problems in society, by the way. It's another story for another day. Okay, loads of problems in society, as you can imagine. Now, moving forward, you've got that sense of awareness, which is imperative. But what if you don't have that? So you're aware of fluctuating bodily states. So you know if you're feeling a bit warm, you'll take your jacket off. You go outside, you feel a bit chilly, you put your jumper on. Okay, so you're aware of that. Okay, you've got enough sense of awareness. Okay, what about consequentially? Separating the mesh from your negative thoughts. Okay, what would you do if you're out in the evening and someone spills a drink on you? So you went out for a meal, you wore your best clothes, okay, and someone spilled a drink all over you. What would your reaction be?
Anger.
And maybe anger. As a result of the anger, consequently is a behavior. Do you strike the person? That would have a consequence. So I might be angry if you spill the drink all over me, but it's very unlikely that most people would strike somebody. They would probably accept their apology, but there are some people that might. And that's their brain going to a fear response, a primal response. And see, not to have a go at teachers, because I've been a teacher myself, where some teachers struggle in the education system, they don't understand enough about certain conditions. Not that they have to understand about conditions, but just enough to know that behavior is an expression. Okay, so the young child who has an outburst, there's generally a reason for having the outburst. Okay, there's a reason for doing what they do. So they might go into survival mode, into primal mode, because the neocortex is shut down. Now, there's a whole different angle. You can do your own research, for example, in autism, where one of the factors is proprioception, interoception, sorry. Now, how do they explain how they feel? And that can be a challenge. And I think with conditions like autism, the spectrum is so variable. It's a challenge because one could have autism and be a professor at a university, and one could have autism and struggle to do basic functional tasks. But then you've got that sort of somewhere in the middle, but equally the expression when you're frustrated. If you can't express yourself when you're frustrated, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think you'll feel? So you get the fizzy pop and you shake it, it goes bang. Okay, so building emotional regulation, being more aware, and I'll talk about why it's useful to be more aware. Because generally speaking, the people who can regulate their emotions will probably do better in life. Hence, we spend a lot of time in schools at academia, but we don't spend a lot of time doing things like self-love, self-worth, understanding your emotion. And these are the things that are going to determine how well you do in life. Not dismissing academia, it's important to a point, but equally, none of it's going to be relevant if you don't have a sense of self-worth and acceptance and aware of your emotion, how you feel. And this way how to regulate that and how to separate the mesh around that. Interoception, how your body feels about a specific situation. So how you know you're hot, you're cold, you're stressed. All those feelings integrate to the insula, like a knock on the door. So rather than tell people to have more awareness of what the emotion is saying, we sort of built a society that tells us to suppress it. And you see it sometimes, and one time I was sort of delivering a course, and at lunchtime I went for a bit of a wander at some lunch, and this little boy was crying, and his parents were saying that he should man up and hold back the tears. And I actually intervened, me being a big mouth that I am, said no, he shouldn't. He should cry if he wants to cry. And the gentleman, who was about a foot taller than me, and built very, very big, came up to my face and said, "Who are you to tell me?" And I thought at that point, wow, maybe I should shut up next time, as you do. But I thought to myself, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. But it's getting them down is the problem. But the point being is that we actually had this conversation afterwards. And they took point. Because I said, it's like a fizzy pop. If he doesn't cry and he bottles it in, where's it going to go? So we know in somatic conditions, the emotions are firing off. And the somatic condition could be a back pain. So it's got to go somewhere. It could be the neck pain. That's another story in a day. I'm not a medical person. I don't profess to be. I do cognitive. So I don't cross that line to biology. But I know enough to know physiologically there is a link. Because I know if you're nervous about an exam, you might need to go to the toilet for a wee. I know if you're really stressed, you might break out in some high. So I also know that stress in moderation is okay. If it's too much stress, then it's probably not a good thing because you've got that cortisol right in the body. So self-awareness, very briefly, before we sort of in the break soon, you've probably come across, I don't know if you've come across the polyvagal theory before, and that was introduced by Dr. Jimmy Petruzzi, Director of Brain Body Center at University of Illinois. When you're in fight or flight mode, by the way, the brain functioning shuts down. The prefrontal cortex shuts down. So the wonderful evolutionary brain you've got closes down. It's gone. Okay? The amygdala deactivates large parts of the neocortex. So you can't evaluate things rationally. If you've got damage to the prefrontal cortex, then you're going to struggle to rationalize. Trauma to the brain, impact, okay, to the brain, or certain conditions that damage that part of the brain, you're not going to be as potentially rational. But equally, stress and pressure can shut that down too. And that's what makes you human to the point that you can rationalize. He or she spills a drink on me, I'm not going to strike that person. I can rationalize the consequence. Okay? For example, if a baboon bites another baboon, what do you think the baboon will do? It will chase the other baboon and bite it back. Okay? It doesn't have the capacity to rationalize in the way we do as human beings. Okay? Someone bites you, you might bite them back. But equally, cutting a long story short, if someone cuts you up on the motorway, it's pointless chasing after them and cutting them up because they've done it to you, because they could be racing their wife to hospital. Many things that could be going on that you can rationalize. So use the rational brain. So from the teaching perspective, the young children, they don't realize things will be going on at home. I know when I worked in care for many, many years in education, they were so hung up about achieving targets in the education sector, they forgot that these were young people who some of them had no parents. No parents. So if you grow up in a world where you don't feel safe, what's that? That's trauma. But here they are hung up about education rather than well-being. And I would always make the point, well, as it happens, education should be a secondary because the well-being. If the young person doesn't feel safe, if you ask a young person, or you ask any person for that matter, did you feel safe around anybody growing up? And they say no, there's a very good chance they're going to have a level of trauma in the brain. Trauma is not just fighting in a war. Trauma could be domestic violence. Many women get killed domestic violence, men too. Trauma could be abandonment. Trauma is many things. And that's going to inhibit our proprioception or interoception, okay, which is important. And the young person can't evaluate things very well. And that could be maybe the mum in the womb had a lot of stress. And we know now phylogenetic history can be a factor in behavior. It's not the only factor, but it could be one factor. So the amygdala, you go to the mammalian brain, the limbic system, and you handle situations that you would handle instinctively. the neocortex has higher cognitive functioning. So executive functioning skills are quite useful. Decision making, collaboration, and so on and so forth. That's another story for another day. But I want you to bear in mind that the amygdala evokes an instinctive fear and anxiety, which pushes us to recreate familiar situation, organism homeostasis. So really, I've always said when you start working in corporate sector, the idea is to provide a nice environment, not stressful one. So when I talk about developing a HPI, a human performance indicator, not the KPI is useful, key performance indicator, but when I talk about the manager not pressuring the staff more than they need to be pressured, encouraging, getting staff to be motivated, enthusiastic, passionate, it's because the higher they are there, the more rational they're going to be. Okay, and that goes for coaching and many things as well, because you can magnify an interpretation. Okay, and you know that the brain isn't fully developed, at least up until about 25. So these teenagers now doing the GCSEs, the A levels, who are being told by staff how important they are, and they are important. I'm not dismissing them, by the way, for 1 minute. But when I talk to teenagers, the idea is for them to be more calm about the situation, because they feel what you feel, they can't process the way you process. Because a teenager could walk in a hallway at a high school and their friend walks straight past them, and that could be the end of the world, because their ability to rationalize. The person may not see them, the person may have something else in their mind. So you can imagine when you've got people saying these exams are going to be instrumental for the rest of your life. No, they're not. You're going to have many tests in life. You're going to have many, many tests. So you can imagine when I talk in schools, especially the more affluent ones, and I tell the young people, they're important, but if you don't enjoy yourself now, when the hell are you going to enjoy yourself? So enjoy yourself. Go outside, kick a ball, have fun. Make mistakes. Be happy. You know, studying is useful, but also make time to be experiential and be absorbed in other things. And if you screw up at university and school, you go again. Maybe they don't want to hear that, because in the end you can't put these big banners saying we're the number one in Ofsted inspection. But the point is, the well-being for me of the young person is more important than the bullshit that they want to portray. They don't have the capacity. And when people argue with me about that, I don't like seeing the stats. I don't like seeing the stats that young people suffer anxiety, depression, even suicide, because they're being Machiavellianly under pressure. Not saying it's down to schooling or the system. Our teachers do the best they can under a system. All I'm saying is that it's about collective responsibility to ensure we give the best possible platform to go forward. Okay? And that's the reason for that. And the more they're aware and you free them up, the more chance they've got of doing well in the exam. Okay? Because if I say to you, an example, there's £1 million on the other side of the floor, even to climb above a scaffold a foot high, would you be capable of doing it? You think you could do it? Could walk across to get, say, maybe £20 on the side? You could. If it was 10,000 feet high, could you do it? How would you feel about doing it then? Far more pressure, you'd probably back out, because the consequence is far greater. So putting consequences of people puts them under a lot of stress. It deactivates that part of the brain they have that makes them human. They go to primal mode. So as a teacher, a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, as a coach, as anybody, create a safe environment for them. Okay? Crucial. Okay? Or you're going to shut down the most instrumental part of the brain. But that's another story for another day. And look for subtle changes. It doesn't have to be that one knockout technique that changes the whole world. Subtle, because the nervous system changes incrementally. And you'll know, the sports people, you don't learn to do things all in one go. It takes incremental steps. To play guitar, you learn one chord. Drum, you learn one tune. So in change, it doesn't have to be the whole bang, link to bound. It can be subtle changes. And do bear in mind, in some cases of PTSD, post-traumatic stress anxiety, there's interruption to interoception. Okay? They struggle for self-awareness. So the people who, and I'm a big fan of mindfulness, by the way, and I introduced it in the education system when I was working in care. I wasn't the only one, but I made a big case for it. But I said it wouldn't work for everybody. Because if you have severe post-traumatic stress, you're going to knock out parts of the brain. So if you've got a young person, you say to them, actually, just be mindful. And they never felt safe around anyone before, there's nowhere to run. They can't get outside their own head. So it might not be the best thing for them. Experiential stuff might be better to get the brain working again. Hence, I'm a big fan of yoga. Now, I can't put my foot behind my neck, but I can do the odd yoga move here and there, and it's a great thing because it stimulates parts of the brain. Experiential stuff, bounding, really, really great because there's a limbic response. You haven't got time to think the limbic system. So all these things are really key. Experiences change people. So do bear that in mind. People are going to struggle to sit still and be mindful. And just be mindful. Just be mindful when you've experienced things that you could never imagine anyone has experienced. Abandonment, trauma, violence. It's hard to sit there and just be mindful. But mindfulness gives us the opportunity to be more self-aware. Okay, and be more in the now. Because if I'm in the now, I'm not worrying about things that are going to happen or hypothesize in the future or the past. Okay, so the goal is that you can manage the response of the internal body states to external stimulus. Can I manage myself? The goal of any coaching or therapy is to go from maladaptive to adaptive response. So awareness, conscious perception of your body. We talked about heartbeat, breathing, but also emotional states. To be more consciously aware, because what you repeat, you're going to get better at doing. You form highways in the brain. So you practice being sad, you'll get better at it. Being angry, get better at it. Being confident, you'll get better at it. Okay? And you know the amygdala now deactivates the neocortex under stress. So neurons are always connecting together. In the 60s, the innovation was neuroplasticity, that the brain could rewire itself. They thought that after 7, you couldn't do any more. In the 80s, neurogenesis meant that we produced new cells. Because we know at a certain age, your cells die. But equally, we know if you constantly do new things, you're going to generate new cells. How long they last, no one knows. But I would say do things different. Okay, always learn something new. I've been a lifelong learner. Practice writing left-hand, right-handed. Walk another way to work. So always defamiliarize the brain to grow that neurogenesis. If to take nothing else away, that's a great thing to do. Okay? And what you repeat, we're going to talk about after the break, doing things that can strengthen pathways in the brain. Strong pathways in the brain, spend connections in the brain for confidence, for happy, for calm, for peacefulness. Some good states to be in. I'm not dismissing states like anger, sadness, frustration as being negative. They're useful to a point because they help us spark us into action. Many successful people have been angry, frustrated, they've done something about it. Just don't stay longer than you need to stay there. Okay? Because you'll end up in a situation like I was a few months ago doing a course, and a guy on the course was that angry for being angry. This guy had anger issues, and he was angry when he wasn't angry. When he was angry about not being angry. And I think he's practiced being angry for so long, it was almost like the old adage where we kind of magnify it. We look for a reason to be angry about, and we get angry about it, we make it a lot more than what it normally is. And equally, on the other end of the spectrum, people just, I'm not saying they're happy in polyamor, the world's a wonderful place, but they've been and worked on being in this state for so long, they're able to adapt to that state. So we'll have a break now for 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to just do some experiential stuff with you, exercise all the way through, and we'll go from there. So yeah, we'll have a 15-minute break, and do come back to doing some experiential stuff after the break.